Welcome back, Jeff.
Nice to see you, Rick. How you been since last month?
About the same.
All right. Good.
Lots of change.
Well, that's one of the things when you're an astrologer, you're immune to change. It's one of the benefits you get by actually studying and practicing astrology. If you don't like change, become an astrologer.
And we have actually part of the Astrological Full Employment Act is those planets keep moving. And as long as they keep moving, we got work. Welcome to the monthly astrology night at SoulFood Books. This is August 1st, and it's a very special night here. We'll get to that in a moment, actually for a number of reasons. What we do is Jeff and I will spend the first 45 minutes or so talking about the cosmic weather, what's going on up there that affects all of us. It affects us differently, but the weather is the same. And we'll talk about that. And then we'll take about a 15-minute break. We'll draw 3 names if you're interested in having your name in the hat or actually on the table, as the case may be. Put your first name, your birth date, place, and time, and we'll pick 3 charts and look at those and give you an idea of what it is we do when we're looking at an individual chart, and try to bring some of the concepts that we talk about here down to individual people.
We have a special night tonight because we're an hour and a half or less than that from a full moon. We have a full moon. Yay! And we like it so much, we're going to have 2 of them this month.
Which is a blue moon, which is not anything to do with astrology, but
That's right.
A blue moon is 2 full moons in 1 calendar month.
And a full moon, as we mention here every month, is an opposition of the moon and the sun, representing at its best a breakthrough point in awareness. Because what we're dealing with is 2 ends of a spectrum. And the spectrum that we're on tonight is the spectrum of the individual and the community. The sun is in Leo, the sign of the individual. And the moon is in Aquarius, the sign of the community. So part of tonight's full moon is about looking at our relationship between the willful, autonomous action of being a Leo god or goddess and the friendly, communitarian, Aquarian behavior of cooperating and working as part of a team.
Yeah, and interesting, today is also, well, within a day, it's one of the cross-quarter pagan Sabbats. This is Lammas. And this is important because, the equinoxes and solstices move by a day or 2 or 3 over the years, but the fixed points of the zodiac do not move. That's why they're fixed points. And so what's interesting is that this full moon falls on this very special night, which is halfway between the summer solstice and the autumn equinox. And interestingly enough, it's the first of the harvest celebrations that really in some way beckon what we'll talk about in a little bit as the sun moves into Virgo later on this month, which is the sign of the harvest, so to speak. Lammas actually comes from the word loaf. It's loafmas, and it's the celebration of the first wheat that makes the loaf of bread, which is related to Virgo. We'll get to that a little bit later.
All right, well, let's come back to the full moon for a moment because it's not even here yet. And one of the things that's important is that it's occurring in fixed signs. The fixed signs occupy the middles of the season. As Rick pointed out, we're mid-season now. Fixed signs are in many ways the most resistant to change. The Leo resistance to change is based upon personal will. I am the god. I only move when I want to, and everything moves around me. Aquarius is a fixed air sign. Aquarius is so weird, it's called the water bearer, but it's not a water sign. It is an air sign, a sign of intellect, and it's about the fixity of mind. And what that fixity really is about is values. What do you value in terms of who you are and what you can create? That's very much part of the story of Leo. But what do you value in terms of intellectual ideas and ideals? That's very much what the Aquarius full moon is. Now, normally when you have a fixed sign event, we expect some very stubborn behavior. Because if you're going to get down to values, you're not going to slice pieces off the top. You're going to get to the essence of the core of your intellectual, your emotional, your material, or your creative values. But this particular full moon is very dynamic and very mobile with lots of opportunities for innovation.
Well, yeah, one of the opportunities for innovation on this full moon is the fact that the full moon is also opposite Mercury. Now, Mercury, granted, is retrograde, but the full moon sweeps past its opposition to Mercury, actually did today prior to the full moon. And then the other thing here is the moon's trine with expansive Jupiter, and Jupiter is fitting into this point that is taking the pressure off of the opposition. An opposition, like Jeff said earlier, is about two energies pulling in opposite directions. And so we have Jupiter forming a harmonious trine on one side with the moon, and on the other side a harmonious or supportive sextile with the sun, which gives us a way to open the energies. It's more expansive than just the typical fixed energy of the fixed Leo and Aquarius.
Yeah, these blue lines, the harmonious aspects between or among planets, basically represent flow. The red lines are where the friction is. So we've got flow from Jupiter, the planet of truth, which is in Gemini right now. That's not a sign in which the morals or the truth of Jupiter is very enduring.
Because Gemini is a con artist.
Well, Gemini,
a trickster.
Gemini is about what's true for the moment. It's not about enduring truths or enduring judgments. So the higher mind planet Jupiter in Gemini at its worst has to do with more BS than usual, but at its best, and certainly at a time like this, it allows us to entertain a variety of perspectives that perhaps can overcome the opposition between self-interest and collective concerns. The other thing is that Uranus, this guy over here, the little TV antenna-looking guy, Uranus, the planet of revolution, is trine or harmonized with the sun, and sextile or about 60 degrees from the moon. This is a tremendous amount of mental energy that we've got going on right now. Aquarius is an air sign. Air has to do with mind. Jupiter's hookup in Aries, Gemini, Jupiter, the planet of higher mind, adds two more layers of cerebral activity. And Uranus, the first planet discovered by telescope, represents, as some called it, the sun behind the sun. It is an orientation of consciousness that's not bound by this solar system and nor an ordinary identity, but it represents a transpersonal stage of human development and takes minds outside the ordinary frames of reference.
Yeah, I really like this full moon. I think you're right, Jeff. Not only, I mean, we isolated Jupiter's trine and sextile, and then you isolated Uranus's sextile, but really what we have going here is the moon opposite the sun with a sextile, sextile, sextile going around the circle with kind of these crisscrossing trines that really make a pattern that in some ways really relieves the pressure of the intensity of the full moon. And yet there's something else that's pretty expansive too, and that is that we have the moon in Aries Aquarius, we have Jupiter and Venus in Aries Gemini, and we have Mars and Saturn in Aries Libra. This is going to become a theme for the month. We'll dig down on this as we get further into the month, as hot Mars moves closer and closer to cold Saturn, which is exact the middle of the month around, I think, on the 15th. But in a way, we have this intellectual intellect, an intellectually self-sufficient grand trine, even though they're not exact by degree numbers, just because of the predominance of all that air energy.
Yeah, now, the great gift of air is ideas and the potential to be objective. What's the great curse of air? Too many ideas. And there are two things in this chart that really highlight that to me. And that is when I think about, in a personal chart, where the lines of development are. I often think of moving from the moon to the sun and the moon's south node to the north node, because the two formers, that is the moon and the moon's south node, represent intrinsic qualities that are already present in a person. Yet developmentally and creatively, both the sun and the moon's north node tend to pull us forward in this lifetime if we lean in that direction. And here, the moon is in air, the sun is in fire. The south node is in Gemini, also air. The north node of growth or integration is in Sagittarius, also fire. And the movement from air to fire is getting out of thinking and moving toward action. That there is something here that suggests that we can sit around and chat and talk about all sorts of things and have 1,000,001 fascinating ideas. But that to fulfill at least some of the potential of this chart happens when we're willing to take the risk of putting our words into motion. And it is a risk. Fire signs are gamblers. Leo and Sagittarius have to do, and fire, including Aries, has to do with acting on things for which we don't have previous evidence. These are creative energies. These are fresh energies. And moving again from talking about things to at least trying some of them out is, I think, part of where the arrows of integration are pointing in this chart.
Yeah, good point. In passing, I don't want to let, is that the right way to say it? I don't want to let the fact that there's no exact square between Uranus and Pluto this month, I don't want to let that slip too far out of our awareness. Remember, we're in a 3-year period actually a 4 or 5 year period, but 3 years of exact squares between revolutionary Uranus in Aries and evolutionary Pluto in Capricorn. This is the revolution of social change and the reclaiming or the reshuffling of power structure. I think that this was exact for the first of 7 times back in June, on June 24th, give or take a day. I think that was right.
I don't recall, but
June 24th, and it will be exact for the next time on September 19th. And then it will be exact 2 more times in 2013, 2 more times in 2014, and 1 more time in March of 2015. So this is something that's not going to let up. And even though it's not exact this month, keep in mind that these larger events, both in our individual lives and socially and culturally out there economically, are sitting in a backdrop of a soup that's being stirred and won't stop for another 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I think it's very important to bring that up. We should probably bring it up every month that we're here for the next couple of years. This has a particular importance here because the modern key ruling planet of Aquarius is Uranus. And so Uranus, in this square, in this right angle with Pluto, is brought into the foreground a little bit. Aquarius is in many ways a sign of the human being. And I think that what the Uranus-Pluto square is about in a larger sense is, can we humans evolve to the next level of consciousness, or are we, Pluto and Capricorn style, going to cling to our crumbling systems and cultures until the last darkest day when all of the lights go out? Or are we going to put our freak flag high and create and discover and become what it is that we have not yet become? You know, the news, there's always bad news, right? We have so many news outlets in the world, so many cameras to take pictures, that it's easy to come up with bad news. But recently we've got, 600 million people in India without electricity. We have Greenland melting at a more serious rate than we expected. The euro, is it going to hold up? I don't know. I'm going to Spain next month because I hear it's on sale. So I hope to bring some of it back with me. But the point is this. I'm not into trying to be negative or scary. But climatologists, even ones paid off, are finally saying, oh yes, there is something about what we humans fart out of the back of our cars, push out of our chimneys, that might have a little bit of influence on this very precious bubble of air in which we all live. And I think what this full moon is an opportunity for all of us to be more creative. And creativity involves experimenting. It involves trying things that you know.
Which is Uranus.
Which is Uranian,
and
which
Aquarian.
is Aquarian. And that is, again, as I've said here many times, I think both the opportunity and the challenge we have in front of us in this full moon gives us, if you want to connect to your higher mind, higher self, your extraterrestrial masters, whatever it is that represents for you a level of intelligence that's above that which we experience on a day-to-day basis, this is a good time to do it.
And I think it's important just to reiterate what you said earlier, and that is with all of this airy energy, the temptation is to do what we're doing about it right now. And that's just bullshit. Talk about it. It may be good bullshit. I mean, I hope it is. But it's easy to talk about it, and yet I think the underlying theme of this month becomes Mars's push toward Saturn, which basically says talking about it isn't enough. You have to do something that sustains it and sustains it in a way that becomes real, and we'll talk more about that again in a moment. I just wanted to bring that back in because it's so much of a theme.
Yeah, I would say I agree. That's well put. I think there's a drag on this, and that's Mercury retrograde. The planet of communication is still going backwards, and it's going backwards in Leo, which we're really proud of our old dumb, stupid stuff, because it was my dumb, stupid idea, so it must be a great, dumb, stupid idea, but it's mine. So what this suggests is, even though we've got a lot of intellectual energy happening, all of this air stuff, the key player of any intellectual activity in astrology is Mercury. And Mercury is sort of doing a little bit of a moonwalk, moving backwards in Leo, watching itself recede in the mirror with great admiration and self-aggrandizement. That's going to change soon.
Yes, and that actually changes on a day that almost becomes a passing off of the cosmic baton, because as Mercury gets done with its 3-week retrograde period, on the same day, Venus, which has been in Gemini forever. I mean, Venus went into Gemini.
Notice a minute feels like forever in Gemini. Just important to note that.
And for a person with 4 planets in Aries, anything over a minute always feels like forever. But Venus moved into Gemini back in April, did it? Earlier than that?
Yeah, and went retrograde on May 15th.
And then went retrograde, which normally Venus whizzes through a sign in about a month. And yet Venus has been in the sign of Gemini now for 3 months, April, May, June, July. Yeah, right. For 3.5 months.
Too long.
And so Venus in Gemini is very light and easy and I'd say forward thinking or progressive, but the direction forward changes with every moment. But it appears as if it's going forward. Now, on the same day that Mercury, after 3 weeks of going retrograde, on the same day that Mercury stands still in the sky to begin going direct, and it does take a few days for it to get any real forward motion, but on the very same day, Venus leaves Gemini, finally, and steps into Cancer, and although Venus is moving forward into Cancer, anything in Cancer is moving backwards, because Cancer is the sign of the crab, and the crab has these big heavy claws in front of it that prevent it from moving forward. So when a crab wants to run, it turns around and it runs like hell backwards so that the claws don't get in the way. And that's what's happening when Venus moves into Cancer.
Well, yeah, before we get there, I want to say something else about Venus and Gemini. We astrologers are sort of given license to insult our own stuff, and I do have Venus and Gemini myself. Venus is love, pleasure, values. Gemini's cheap. So it is.
That's why Jeff's been married for over 20 years.
Right. But what that means
Another theory
is
shot to hell.
you can have, well, there are other factors involved. But
Hopefully.
the thing with Venus in Gemini is that you can have a high set of expectation for something you're going to buy, for something you're going to do, for something that, let's say you're going to go to the store and you know this expensive thing that you were going to get or this high quality thing, and then your eye gets caught by the flash of something cheap that you don't even need. And Venus in Gemini is very easily distracted. The principle of values with which Venus is associated tends to fluctuate rather easily with Venus in Gemini. It has its benefits, certainly, but I agree with Rick that shift on the 7th, although Mercury is going to take days until it really gets some forward momentum, that shift of Venus into Cancer basically means a lot of the emotional stuff, a lot of the deeper feeling stuff that we've been able to dance around since late April is likely to come back to us. Because Cancer, as a water sign, as a feeling sign, is more comfortable with going deeper, sitting longer, contemplating, struggling in a way that I don't think Venus in Gemini does.
So on the 7th, as Mercury turns direct and begins to free up some of the mental, analytical reconsiderations, reviews, the places where we've been stuck in communication, when that's freed up or begins to be freed up on and around the 7th, Venus moving into Cancer kind of sinks our feelings down another level into a realm of heightened sensitivity. And that happens on the 7th. And this is a really interesting transition because as Venus moves into Cancer, it immediately begins picking up on a trine that's a harmonious superconductive aspect to Neptune, the planet of imagination and dreams. And Neptune has recently this year returned back into its home sign, as it does once every 165 years or so. And it's back in Pisces, a water sign. So when Venus moves into Cancer, a water sign, on the 7th, by the 9th, she'll be exactly harmonizing, trining to nebulous Neptune, which heightens our sense of dreams and our imagination. It creates an idealism around love, around romance, around those things that we like or love. That would be Venus in Cancer, which doesn't have to do with the next distraction as it might have had to do with in Gemini, but now it has to do with those things that really move our soul, that go to the bottom of who we are, that are a bit deeper. And maybe also fears, because Cancer, I think, often is afraid of change.
Well, yeah, and it's about memory. It evokes emotional memory. But Venus is on a strange journey this month.
Whew.
She enters Cancer and forms 2 days later on August 9th a trine, a harmonious angle with idealistic, magical Neptune. Oh, life is sweet, life is wonderful, we're also spiritual and good. We can sort of connect the Venus in Cancer, old social, personal values, likes, the whole sentimental claptrap that can happen.
No judgment
in
there,
Cancer.
though, of course.
No judgment at all. Venus is in Gemini, I'm just reporting. But on claptrap. But here's sweet little Venus, like Little Red Riding Hood. She gets in Cancer. She gets all sort of warm and cozy. She meets the good witch,
She packs
Glenda.
her lunch because food is certainly a Cancerian thing.
And then she trines Neptune and the good witch, Glenda, tells her how wonderful everything is and how good she is. And the big bad wolf is 6 days away. As Venus on the 15th opposes Pluto, the kidnapper and rapist of Persephone, and forms a square, a 90-degree angle with that punk Uranus, what that means is that the principles of love and values in relationship, which have gotten more rooted in Cancer, they've reconnected us with old tastes and old traditions and old desires and old hungers and old joys. And Neptune says, sure, you can have it, you can have it. And then 6 days after that Neptune transit, we face, right? Shock, surprise, breakthrough, another set of values. It's a different ballgame. That little Red Riding Hood of a Venus in Cancer now needs to become a big bad wolf in her own right. And in doing that, instead of being contented with grandma's cookies, if she wants a little more, it is engaging Pluto, our own desire, I think, that reduces our likelihood of being victimized by someone else's desires or manipulative behavior. And Venus square Uranus, which is going on that same day, is the confrontation of surprises, romantically, aesthetically, financially, socially. So I think she's got a very interesting ride this month.
Yeah, now this brings back the Uranus-Pluto square that I mentioned earlier, because although it was exact back in June, and it'll be exact again in September, and then on again a few times over the next several years, every time a faster-moving planets such as Mercury, Venus, Mars, the Sun, or even the Moon every week, every time a faster-moving planet reaches this point, the point where Pluto is, the point where Uranus is, the point where Venus is now, but is normally opposite Pluto and square to Uranus, or this point over here opposite Uranus, every time a planet reaches one of those points, that standing wave, that kind of the background hum of this 3-year, 4-year, 5-year change is being re-upped again. And in fact, if we played back, which we're not going to do, but if we played this backwards, within a day of the terrible tragedy at the Aurora movie theater, we had Mars, which had moved into Libra, and it was at the point here, this triangle would have been flipped the other way, so that Mars, the planet of aggression and violence and war, amongst other things that are nicer, but Mars on that day was opposite Uranus and square to Pluto. So what we're coming into here with Venus moving into that same position, again, I'm not predicting that there'll be an event like that. Again, that's not what I'm saying, but there's this continuing reference to the deeper issues that come out one way or another that will be a repetitive theme.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very comforting to think, well, some people go nuts and they arm themselves and they're destructive. And that has nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with our culture. It's just...
Well, you're saying it's very comforting but not true.
Exactly. Exactly. That it's comforting for us to take
be in denial.
Whoever is the destructive, crazy person and just isolate them. Well, Venus is a planet of relationship, and she's pretty sticky in Cancer. And Venus coming into that point that Rick mentioned earlier, the Uranus-Pluto, may challenge us to look at our own sort of cultural positions and what are the larger issues that allow this kind of craziness or that support it. In a metaphysical reality, there are no accidents. Everything is connected to everything else. And yet here, this is an event nobody wants to be connected to, and Uranus-Pluto square represents a kind of torque of energy that almost nobody really knows how to connect with, and yet we're challenged to engage it then. And it makes me think an old movie, a Stanley Kubrick movie, Dr. Strangelove. And I think the subtitle was How I Stopped Worrying and Learned to Love the Bomb. And in many ways, that's what Venus in Cancer opposing Pluto, plutonium, square Uranus, uranium, may be about. And what I mean is, it's not that we're supposed to engage or love destructive things. It is, however, our opportunity to meet the monster of madness, weirdness, the inappropriate, out of phase, out of the box, and go, that's part of me too. And maybe, if I can take on one millionth of a percentage of that madness, and you take on your little piece, and your little piece, we will help heal some of the societal and cultural malaise. There's something else going on that day, which
that
makes
would
it
be
amazingly important.
No, and just the Venus opposition to Pluto and square to Uranus would be amazingly important. And then to have something else that happens every other year on the exact same day makes it amazingly importanter.
Yeah, well said.
Thank you.
He's got a gift.
Yeah, if I keep my mouth shut. And what that is, and I referenced this, or we referenced this earlier, that is Mars, which takes almost 2 years to go around the zodiac once. Mars catches up with Saturn. Mars is the assertive, aggressive planet. Mars is the god of war, but it's also the planet that we use to defend our boundaries and our territory. Mars is the guy planet. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, men are from Mars. Well, whatever. We're actually both from both planets in my way of looking at things. However, Mars is how we go forward. It's how we assert. And Mars is red hot and ready to go. And it catches up with, or maybe runs into, Saturn, which is as cold as Mars is hot. Saturn is as resistant as Mars is assertive or forceful. And so here we have an interesting dilemma. We have all of this Venus stuff that we've been both talking about as Venus moves into this dynamic place of needing to reclaim her power, perhaps, or be at the wrong end of the stick from that same power. And on the same day, Mars has to learn a pretty serious lesson.
Yeah, there's linkage, not only by time, but because Mars and Saturn are joining in Libra, which is one of the two home signs of Venus. It's a relationship sign. Mars and Saturn are like the compulsories in ice skating. Because there's movement, that's Mars, but in a strict form, which is Saturn's work. Typically, when we're dealing with hard connections between Mars and Saturn, the go or hot Mars, which Rick described, and the cold or stopped Saturn can be frustrating. However, in any Mars-Saturn connection, when you are impeccable and right on it, you can be extraordinarily effective. And here, it's like, here we've got this hot relationship stuff, Venus to Pluto and Uranus, and the need to act, that's a good Mars word, responsibly, Saturn, with incredible clarity and cool.
I think that you sometimes say, and I like this, I love it when we quote each other, and then I said that? No, you said, is that when we have a conjunction between Mars and Saturn, there's a very small margin for error. It's like there's a precision. Jeff talked about the required, the compulsories. But there's not much margin for error. There needs to be focus. I have a friend, an associate actually, someone I know, who has an exact Saturn-Mars conjunction natally. And this man started a company and grew it rather large, very fast, and then it bankrupted. And fired had to let 100 people go. And did this about 4 times in his life until he found the right rhythm. And now he's the head of a multi-million dollar empire that has wonderful products. I'm not going to talk about what it is because I don't want to identify the person.
And but they're not legal, these products.
They are. But the fact is, but as I look at this gentleman, it's a Saturn-Mars person, and he's an Aries to boot, so he had the assertive, aggressive energy. And so there's the sense of he finally learned how to use Saturn's restraining power so that Mars didn't get too hot, too fast, and basically blow its load. But instead was able to sustain it and now has an enduring system that will continue long after his years.
Yeah, well, this Mars is actually pretty cool because it's in Libra, a sign where the raw passion and self-interest of Mars is filtered through a diplomat's consciousness or the awareness of others. And maybe that's part of what the challenge/opportunity is here, to recognize whatever craziness you meet in your banker, in your partner, in your associate, whatever it is. In Libra, we have an obligation to recognize that we're in a relationship with that thing.
And it's also supported by this sextile to the sun, which is exact over the next few days and lasts for about a week after that.
Yeah, that raises a good point, because so much of Leo's power arises from the sense that it is the only monarch. And yet, harmonious relationships between the Leo sun and Saturn and Mars in relational Libra are the reminder that a monarch or a leader is only as effective as her or his associates will allow her or him to be.
Now, at the height of this energy, where also, if you notice here, the moon is in late Cancer, and as we move forward on the 17th, just a couple of days after this powerhouse of a day, we have our next lunation, our new moon in late Leo on the 17th of August.
Well, and the new moon's the beginning of a cycle every month. The new moon in Leo is a new cycle of heart, of love, of romance, of creativity, of self-expression, of drama, hopefully of generosity as well. These are certainly some of the more desirable traits of Leo. But what happens often with a new moon, it's new, it's naive, we blow the energy off, and whatever seeds we planted don't necessarily take root. This is an incredibly constructive and productive new moon because of responsible Saturn, because of energetic Mars aligning favorably with this new moon. We have the capacity to take that impulse of Leo creativity and channel it into a form that we can stay committed to and build something that is likely to last.
I agree with one caveat, and that caveat is Mercury, which we have to be careful about our logic, because our logic can be a bit original, inventive, erratic, and wrong or sloppy. And what I'm saying here is that Mercury, which is now moving direct, on the day of the new moon and the following day, forms a irritating quincunx. That's an aspect of ill adjustment or no contact or no adjustment. Jeff calls it the aspect of oil and water, where Mercury in Leo is the mind, is communication. Leo is direct, it's fixed, it's doing it out in the open, it's presenting what it knows, and yet its quincunx to Pluto indicates some undercurrents that may be emotional undercurrents that have a little bit to do with maybe ill adjustment or not quite correct amount of application of our intellect or power. And yet Mercury is also working on a harmonious trine to Uranus. Again, it's bringing back up the Uranus-Pluto square because there's originality of thinking here with its trine to Uranus, but we may overstate our cause.
Yeah, because the crime of Mercury in Leo is arrogance, is becoming our own closed system.
And that's 100% fact.
Right, that's the way it is. And Capricorn and Leo are both dominant kinds of signs. Leo is important because it was born to it or is talented or thinks it's important. Capricorn is important because they work for it and earned it. And I think that Capricorn's ruling planet Saturn's relationship to Mars here says you're not getting any of this off the ground, no matter how brilliant it is. Again, unless you recognize the reality that you're operating in and you make adjustments to the structures that are there. The enemy of creativity very often is the status quo. There are many people who come up with brilliant, creative, and good ideas who are defeated by mediocrity that's already in place. And powerful Pluto and Capricorn can just say, look, I've earned my turf here, and I'm not giving it up just because you have a better idea. You're going to have to work a little harder to prove it and to earn it. Quit while we're ahead?
I don't think we're ahead yet. We have to swim faster, harder.
All right.
A couple days later, actually a few days later, on the 22nd, the sun moves out of Leo, which means that it moves into Virgo. And here we have that same interesting dilemma when Venus moved into Cancer, because as the sun, when Venus moved into Cancer, it picked up on Neptune, on a trine to Neptune. Now we have the sun moving from Leo into Virgo. Virgo is usually precise, it's usually exacting, and yet that sun immediately picks up on an opposition to nebulous Neptune.
Yeah, and the downside of that is being precise about your illusion. You know, being so narrow and so specific that you're blinded to the larger field, to the forest.
Jeff has heard me say this before, but one of my won't stop me from saying it again. One of my favorite quotes from Niels Bohr, the guy who invented
very
quantum,
uninteresting guy, by the way,
who invented quantum physics. He once wrote, "One should never speak with more clarity than one has." One should never speak with more clarity than one has. And this sun opposite Neptune, in a way, it's living our life with more clarity than really may be appropriate, because there's something here that begs for the imagination to come into play, and yet that sun in Virgo wants to live under that illusion that everything is exact and precise.
Right, and the positive side of this opposition can be Neptune's forgiveness, but it can also mean that the analytical work and service and concreteness and practicality of Virgo is inspired by something larger, which is what Neptune is about. Also, you'll notice there's a planet that changes signs the next day. That's Mars in Scorpio. I want to bring up something about the bad press Virgo gets in the world of Eros. Because Virgo is called the Virgin, there was the assumption that Virgos are prudes. And I don't think that's not, of course, the original meaning of the word Virgo, virgin, which was a woman who was independent.
Who is not property.
Right, right. It doesn't mean that she wasn't sexual. And quite frankly, I used to work for a very wealthy guy in Atlanta years ago who he died in a sexual accident. And he had lots of Virgo in his chart. And I realized the kinkiness of Virgo, because Virgo is so precise.
Wait, can we go back a little bit? Can we get more details?
Yeah, I'm going to no, I'll leave that out for now. But
it just passed right over that.
Right. Well, I don't want anybody to hurt themselves having their last good time. But first of all, Virgo is an earth sign. So it represents energy that is embodied rather than disembodied. But I think that the kinkiness of Virgo has to do with precision. That in a Virgo world, things have specific ways of operating that is optimal. So if you tug my left ear twice, stroke the right side of my neck 3 times, I'm getting off.
I ain't doing it. Our partnership is over.
How do you think I heard about this? No. But the point is this. I do want to restore the notion of sensuality, well, to all the signs, but particularly for Virgo because of the bad press they get, and because sex's little pointy part, Mars, is entering Scorpio the next day. We're in an environment which is going to be heated up when it comes to passion.
Yeah, I just want to go back to that Virgo thing for just one moment, because I think you hit on something really important. And since
I never hit on that thing. I didn't. I was just having a conversation. I was just being a friendly Venus in Gemini.
And it killed him.
You're projecting, Rick.
I'm projecting Rick because it's the only thing I have to project. Okay.
Right.
The reason we often hear, we're coming into the time of year of Virgo, so that will be toward the end of the month, August 22nd, 23rd, and the sun will be in Virgo then for a full month. Virgo, as Jeff, I think, very correctly defined or talked about, is about the ownership of oneself. Because when a woman is property, then she doesn't have the right of refusal. And this does often surround issues of body boundaries and of sexuality. And so a virgin actually in Greek society was legally the only woman who could say no, because other women were properties of their owners, their husbands, their masters, whatever. And we often think of Virgo as the sign that is picky, it's finicky, it's critical. And all of these are about creating boundary between yes and no. And so the strength of Virgo actually derives from this idea of being able to clearly make what a computer scientist would call a binary decision. And Virgo is the sign of binary decisions. 0, 1, on, off, yes, no. Unlike Gemini, where 0 and 1, yes and no, can exist happily side by side. I love you and you. You know, I love black and white. In Virgo, it's yes or no. And so from that standpoint, the connection between this thing that you brought up and I think the ultimate strength of Virgo, which is now strengthened even more as Mars goes into Scorpio, is the ability to define one's own boundaries with clarity, except, Houston, we have a problem, and that is that the sun's opposition to Neptune, just for those first couple of days, totally diffused those boundaries. And so we have a really juicy dilemma here, I think.
But through the following 30 days,
yes,
that sun in Virgo is about healthy and appropriate discrimination. That's part of what Virgo does. It teases out in any given situation where those decisions. Now, the following day, Mars goes into Scorpio. Now, Mars is probably going to be happy about it, at least from a traditional astrological
perspective. It gets away from Saturn, too.
Gets away from Saturn. Well, Mars doesn't mind Saturn. I'm not sure, but Mars is not all that happy.
You're not an Aries.
In Libra. True. But Mars entering Scorpio, its traditional water home sign, Aries is its traditional fire home sign, represents the ability to engage at a deeper level of intensity and passion. Libra and Scorpio are the two primary relationship signs. Libra is the recognition of the other as desirable, attractive, interesting, worth communicating and talking with. Scorpio, the following relationship sign, is about fusion. It is about where we throw our lot in with one another and are changed by one another. And Mars in Scorpio certainly has some of those transformative qualities.
And deliciously, Mars in its first few days in Scorpio picks up, and this is a repeating theme of this month, whether from tonight's full moon, which is very soon in 20 minutes or so, when we have an opposition, as we do between the exacting Virgo sun and the diffusive Neptune or Pisces Neptune, what we have as Mars moves into Scorpio is it picks up on the sextile to the sun and a trine to Neptune, which strengthens it, I think, significantly.
Yeah, and it adds another asset to our skill set. The sun is will. The sun is the master, and the sun in Virgo has the capacity to be analytical, discriminating, all of that stuff. Mars is the servant of the sun. Mars is how we get things done. And Mars in Scorpio represents another layer of awareness, a layer of awareness that is connected to instinct and feeling. So it's like the king, the sun in Virgo, goes out there and says, I want this done. And in the field, life is not as clean and orderly as the sun in Virgo would like it to be. It is the instinct of the executioner, of the actor, of the doer of the deed, Mars, in Scorpio, a sign of instinct, which will then determine whether we're going to be effective or not.
Full moon?
Yep.
And Mercury then into Virgo, the day of, just after the full moon.
Okay.
So we're now going to jump to the last day of August, August 31st.
And that is what we call a blue moon. Astrologers, we don't care.
Why don't we care, Jeff?
Well, because astrology is not rooted in the structure of the calendar. We're rooted in the naturalistic structures of the cycles of the sun, the moon, and the planets. And there's a rough approximation of a month to a month, as you say, but it really, specific dates don't mean that much to astrologers because planets don't show up at the same day in the same place every year.
And so what we have on the 31st, and for those of you who are Virgos, that is at 6:58 a.m. on August 31st. And we have the full moon in Pisces, which is a fat and juicy, watery full moon, is opposing that narrowing laser-like beam of the precision of the Virgo sun.
So it's the contrast between content, which is Earth, Virgo, and intent, which is feeling, or the subjective quality of experience that we have. Is it better to do something sloppy with care and with compassion and engagement? Or is it better to stay cold and cool like a surgeon to get the job done without being emotionally involved? And this full moon pushes us on to that duality, that polarity between the cool dryness of Virgo and the wet engagement of Pisces.
Yeah, the Virgo sun wants ultimately for whatever information it has to be useful. That's I think the ultimate litmus test when it's doing its yes or no, its binary, choice, is if I can use this, if this is valuable for application, then it's okay. Otherwise, it's not worth it. And I think here with the sun in Virgo, that's about the useful application, whereas the moon says, but our feelings are our feelings. I don't care whether they're valuable. I want to be able to dream. I don't care if my dreams become real. I don't care if they're useful. They're useful just by the fact that I get to dream them.
Yeah, and the other thing is that Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac.
Does that mean we're done?
Right, and as a boundless water sign is all-inclusive. So the function of Pisces is I'm going to find something in common with all of you. We're one soul, we're one spirit, where Virgo is the opposite end of that spectrum that says, well, we may be in principle, but in practice, I've got my story and you've got yours. So we're moving along that polarity between discrimination and absorption. And absorption may win, huh?
I think so. And once again, like the opening full moon tonight, once again, we have a full moon with these sextiles going around that take the pressure off. Here, the key is Pluto, the moon's sextile, the full moon sextile to Pluto, and the sun's trine to Pluto, but even Mars is coming into the picture here, still lingering from its sextile to the sun a few days ago, and the moon's trine to Mars. And so once again, we have a stressful full moon, and yet there's a real internal network of planetary support.
Right. If we get into the Piscean side, which is expanded with the moon's conjunction to sensitive Chiron, the wounded healer, and to Neptune, Pisces modern, a ruling planet, that can be at its worst stumbling around in your own haze, in your own drunken experience. But Mars and Pluto are like having two badass bodyguards with you, because their connections to that Pisces moon is there to protect or there to pull you out of a situation if you get in over your head, or at least there's that potential.
And look how close Uranus is now back to the square to Pluto. It's 7 degrees Aries, 39 minutes, and 7 degrees Capricorn, 2 minutes. So it's only a half a degree apart. Remember, they conjunct again next month in September. But we also have a sign change that day. It's later that day, and as Mercury moves out of Virgo, out of Leo. Let me get this back here, right here. Mercury moves out of Leo, and boom, there it goes into, right there, into, out of Leo and into Virgo.
And that has two positive effects. One is that Mercury is comfortable in Virgo. It's one of its two natural or home signs. The other benefit of this is now we've got the Sun and Mercury in the same sign. And what that suggests is that the I of ego and the EYE of the mind's eye are at least speaking a more similar language.
Right, and again, and we'll get into this more when we return next month, actually when I return next month, because Jeff will be in Spain. But what happens is as Mercury goes into Virgo, it too wants to become more analytical and precise, and yet within a day it bumps into its opposition with Neptune, so it goes through that same dilemma of needing to focus and needing to diffuse.
Yeah, and maybe the gift of these oppositions to Neptune, or among the benefits that we derive, is even though I'm on a mission with a particular focus, that's Virgo, I'm reminded of a larger context. If we don't get lost in that larger context, it can enrich the whole process of whatever it is we're going after. Okay, so that's another month in the tank. If you would like us to take a look at your chart, put your first name, your time, date, and place of birth on a piece of paper, put it up here on the front table, and we'll get to it. I have one other thing that I want to share with you. These videos go out through SoulFood and Ustream. Rick and I put them on YouTube through Star IQ. It wouldn't be possible without Julie Webgirl, and Julie has created, yeah, let's hear it for Julie. She's a little tall, but that's not her fault. But Julie has created astrology pendants based upon your unique birth chart. You can come up here and take a look at them. She's got a sale going on. If you buy one, you get a second one for half price. If you want to make astrology part of your decoration and your daily life, that's certainly one way to do it. We'll see you in about 15 minutes.
And remember also that Soul Food gives us this place as part of a community service. Jeff and I come here every month. We've been doing it for 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, something like that. And the way you can make sure that we keep doing this is to patronize Soul Food. If you have that gift that you've been putting off, take a walk around the store, buy it here, get yourself an extra cup of coffee because you really don't want to sleep tonight.
What if they don't want us here?
Never mind. Anyhow, and we would like to thank our baristas tonight. We have Annette and Lily taking care of us. Thank you so much, guys. And patronize Soul Food. We'll see you back here in about 15 minutes. Thank you. And be careful out there. Put him under Julie's butt. Yeah, she likes him there.
I'll give you. Attention, attention. I want to make an announcement for the community here at SoulFood Books. I just wanted to let everyone know, you may have noticed, my wife and I are sitting over here in the corner, and we're celebrating our 32nd wedding anniversary today. And the one thing that binds us together is the one activity at SoulFood Books that we've done together consistently over the years has been to come to Astrology Night. So I thought, what better time and place, especially with the full moon and everything else that's going on, to sort of renew our commitment both to the community and to each other. I have a little gift here for my wife for our anniversary. And I was also hoping that Rick and Jeff could do a little reading sort of similar to what they just did, but go back in time to the exact time when we said our vows, which was right around now, but 32 years ago. So, and there is our actual wedding invitation is over there on the table. It's in stained glass and everything, and it has that exact place and time listed on it.
Are we all invited?
Yes, you're invited. Okay, and here's the gift. This is a gift from the heart, and consists of two things. First off, I was going through all of our old memorabilia recently and came across a beautiful locket that we apparently bought right around that time, but never did anything with, and just held on to it all these years. And our children have been kind enough to take this locket, and basically, if I can open it, kind of fumbling here. Wish my daughter was here because it's got a funny little clasp on it. Oh, there it goes. So if you can see this, it pops open, and it has now in it each of the kids, their favorite. One of which is standing in the back here, smiling at me, going. So his smiling face is there. Derek, my other son, my daughter couldn't be here tonight because of she's at dance practice. But so there's that. Derek, you want to? And the other artifact is a ring, and we have all kinds of artifacts here. So, okay, but so this is a ring that I've held on to for many, many years. It turns out it was given to my dad by my mom, and they just celebrated their 55th? Is it? No. Okay, we were just there. We should know this. Yeah, so they're like 80 years old now and still going strong. So anyway, my mom gave this to my dad, and he barely ever wore it, and he gave it to me. And I thought this would be a great ring to have me give now to my wife as I do this after I do the quick reading. So, by the way, the ring has a sort of a ruby and a diamond in it, which for me represent the deep meaning of, I give both my heart and my soul and my mind. So, by the way, I wanted to basically say what I said to her on the altar, my wedding vows, right? But, of course, I can't remember what those were. And they didn't do videos back then. So I had no record. And I'm looking around, going through all the memos, and this one little note falls out. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to read very quickly just one piece of it. But, I mean, it starts out 6/5/80 at 1:30 p.m. So it was leading right up to our wedding. And it's, "Dear Bill, I love you. Last night I spent time taking all our pictures and memories out and arranging our pictures in one place. I came across the letters you wrote to me when you were beginning college, and how we were spending a lot of time, at work, and not with me. And then she goes on. There's a lot of heartfelt expression here. But near the end, this is wonderful stuff. I'm practicing my vows, but I have the book, and you need it to practice. So I'll write it here so you can store it in your photographic memory, or in your case, your core memory, which if you know anything about computers in that day and age, they had core memory. So, and then in quotes, it says, I, William, take you, Donna, to be my wife. I promise to be true to you in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health. And I will love you and honor you all the days of my life, quote unquote. So I've just re-acknowledged that commitment. Love you as much or more than ever. And I would hope you would take this ring as a symbol of that commitment again. You don't have...
Come gather round, people.
So we're going to take a look
wherever you
at
roam.
a few charts as we point out every month. These are just little mini readings to give you an idea of what individual charts look like, what personal charts look like, as opposed to the collective cycles that we talked about earlier. This is by no means an attempt to be an in-depth interpretation.
And we're going to start off a
What's that?
snapshot.
Snapshot.
And we're going to start off by taking a quick look at Bill and Donna's marriage chart. And thank you, Bill, and Donna for sharing your did she say yes? She said okay.
She said okay.
That's almost as good as yes. It's
If
not
I
a
have to.
It's definitely not a no. And so the first thing I have to say about this chart for your marriage, how many years ago? 32 years ago is it won't last.
It was a good run. Yeah, exactly. The kid knows. He knows. He's a witness or hostage, depending. Well, you know, one of the things astrologers do in analyzing charts is to look at any planets that are angular. Angular means along the horizon, which is due east and west, or along the meridian, which is the north-south axis indicated by that little arrow at the top. And what's quite interesting here is that Venus, the planet of love, is right at the marriage or partnership point.
In Gemini, which we were talking about earlier.
Right. So that's certainly, it's Venus and Gemini in the 7th. I think it's about keeping this relationship new, keeping each other amused, staying young, being into a place of discovery. You know, couples like individuals sort of tilt towards safety and security or stimulation and interest, and this chart leans a lot more towards stimulation than primarily rooting itself in security.
The other two planets that are also angular are Pluto, the powerhouse planet, the planet of intensity, and the moon. And the moon here in Aries also speaks of what you said about the newness or the need for new. And yet there's a pretty dynamic square that kind of would suggest that there's communication stuff that goes to the mat. You know, that there's strong communication stuff over intense issues, and yet this stress and this dynamic aspect here is ameliorated by the dream, by Neptune, the planet of spiritual love, the higher love that kind of takes the pressure off and really is very sweet. Also, another trine here between Mercury and Uranus, and that is that one of the things that would make this marriage work consistently is reinventing itself, is being outside of the box, is doing things in ways that are new and different and innovative, that may not be tied to the status quo, but that are tied to your own, way of doing things.
Yeah, I think that Mercury, the communication planet, as Rick pointed out, in a very strong complex of patterns, right angles to Mars, Pluto at the top, to the moon at the bottom, could indicate some fierce discussions to try to get one's point of view across. But I think the Neptune means that you eventually realize it doesn't matter. That quite frankly, we're trying to, and not understanding each other is very underrated in the success of a relationship, because not having to understand everything leaves space to breathe and leaves space to be individuals within the relationship. And that, I'm not saying this is the end all and be all. I wouldn't use a wedding chart to analyze a relationship. I'd use the charts of the two people involved.
I agree.
This will basically tell you how good the food was and how long the band played.
However, I would say that it was an intense day, and based upon this chart, I would, from the day that you were married, I would give you guys maybe about 6 or 7 years, period, max.
Somebody got lucky. I can tell that from this chart. That's clear. So thank you for sharing, you guys, and congratulations, Most human beings are despicable and intolerable, and anybody who can stand anybody else for more than 15 minutes, chapeau. You tip of the hat. All right.
All right, when we do your chart, if you'd stand up, wave your arms around so everyone can know that it's you that we're embarrassing, that would be important. That wasn't you, Leah. You don't have to,
We'll get you later.
Yeah. So our first chart is Doug, born August 17, 57.
Happy birthday, Doug.
Happy birthday, Doug.
Doug.
Interestingly, Doug came up to me at the break and said, my birthday is actually on the day of the full moon, the Mars, Saturn, all of that stuff is right around there. And then we picked him.
Right. This is like, this chart's a great combination. We don't know whether we're going to get mellow Doug or intense badass Doug.
And what makes you say that?
Well, he's got the moon in Taurus, which is usually pretty mellow. But the moon in, didn't he have an aspect to the moon?
Yes, a square to Uranus.
The moon is square the planet Uranus, which is like, I'm really easygoing, just don't get in my shit. Because Uranus is a planet of independence, and when it's hooked up with the moon of habit and need, it's like, hey, I'm really easygoing, just don't push me at all.
Well, and I
hope that wasn't too offensive.
Well, right. and I think it's not only just Doug also has a very high propensity toward managing this sense of stability and doing what he's supposed to, meeting responsibilities, and yet at the same time not playing by other people's rules at all. Most of us go through life and we either feel constrained and responsible and mature, or we're busting loose. In a way, this whole idea of busting loose is very important for Doug, and when those two are not in balance, I think that's when the explosive, that's when the, kind of temper or whatever it is that might, come into being, is when he feels like someone's pushed him, one too many times in a wrong direction.
Yeah, and I think whatever you do, Doug can do it better. He's got a bunch of planets in Virgo. He's a Leo. What's that?
Oh, isn't that an old song? Anything you can do, I can do better.
But Mars, the planet of action, Mercury, the planet of intellect, Venus, the planet of love and relationship, they're all in Virgo. And that talks about some pretty clear and precise ideas about how things are supposed to be. And being a Leo with a Sun-Pluto conjunction, he's got the will to, stick to it.
And Venus has been, over these last months, been going back and forth over his ascendant. Venus doing its retrograde dance in Gemini. And so the sweet, lovely, wonderful, days of spring and summer are soon to end. I'm kidding.
No, there's an intensity. See, the thing is, if you hire or work with Doug because you know he can manage things, what you've got to know is over time he's going to change them. He's a builder, and then unless it's transformed, he's not going to be happy.
Loses interest.
Right. Uranus, the planet of freedom at a right angle to the moon of habit, is one indicator of that. And it's also an expression of the sun of will in creative Leo joined transformational Pluto. And that's very much about, okay, I'm going to maximize this experience. I'm going to push it to the limit. You're going to get all of me, but don't necessarily expect me to stick around if it's not interesting anymore, because you're too dynamic, I think. You need to transform things. Did I wake you? I'm sorry.
Huh? Yeah,
When Rick sees a Taurus moon, he falls asleep. It's not personal. So the fact that Doug is having the new moon on his birthday, certainly is an astrological indicator of some exciting new creative stuff in the year ahead. All right. And the other thing, Doug, it's not your job to make things easy for us. Your North Node, your point of growth of integration is in Scorpio. Being thorough, deep, complex, and transformative is probably not easy, but better, I think, in the long run for you than just sort of making things calm and sticking to the status quo. Okay? Thank you, Doug. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday
to Doug. Happy birthday.
Okay, Dina Marie. There you are.
Hey, how are you? Okay.
That's not true. You do know. It's just different.
You're not telling.
It's just different moment to moment.
Yeah, when the public says I'm a double this, I'm a triple that, they generally think it's because they have X amount of planets in a sign. To astrologers, it's sun, moon, and ascendant. And Dina Marie, I'm sorry, is the 1 out of 1,000 plus who has the sun. No, it's 1 out of 144 who has the sun, moon, and ascendant in the same sign.
No, it's 12 times 12 times 12.
No, because it's just it's 12 times 12. To have two things in the same sign is a 1 out of 12 shot.
Okay.
To have three, I think. At any rate, Dina, you're weird. I hope that helps.
All right, next. Well, the thing that strikes me of interest here is that we've been talking about for months and will continue to for years. We've been talking about the square that we're all processing now between revolutionary Uranus and evolutionary Pluto. And in 1964 and 1965, Uranus and Pluto were conjunct. It's what created or defined the 60s. And Dina Marie was born with Uranus and Pluto aligned in Virgo, and they were both opposite Saturn. And this is a very dynamic energy that is personalized. This was cultural, but social, but it was personalized in Dina Marie's chart because the moon in Gemini is square both restraining Saturn and the explosive Uranus-Pluto conjunction. And so there's this kind of dualistic sense that you have in life of feeling maybe sympathy or attraction to both maintaining the status quo and blowing it up.
Yeah, the moon, which represents nurturance and feeling in the 12th house, means usually somebody who doesn't feel all that well understood. You have Saturn in a square or right angle. You have weird Uranus and potent Pluto. And it's like, let me get out of the line of fire here. Let me go off in my room. I'm so much more interesting than what's going on out there. And if I try to explain it to these idiots, they're not going to get it anyway. One of the things is Gemini is essentially a young sign. It's only the third sign of the zodiac. But Dina Marie was born with the moon coming back to the sun in an old moon phase. It's almost like you know all this stuff. Whether we're interested, whether we can understand it, whether we can get it, that's, I think, one of the life issues for you.
Also, another chart in which we have two charts in a row now where Venus has been in its retrograde. Venus in April, May went across your ascendant and your sun, and then it pulled back over it, and now it's going across it for the third and final time. Actually, it already has. And so there's this emphasis again on either charm or things that you like, or maybe things are. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't other things that are heavier or more complicated, but the Venus part of your chart has perhaps lightened things up a bit for you in the last couple months.
And I think pleasing yourself without having to explain yourself is a good thing. You have Venus, the planet of pleasure, join the integrative north node of the moon in a part of the chart, the first house that belongs to you. You have the south node of the path of least resistance in the house of others in dutiful Capricorn. And it's sort of like, that's not quite as much your job to explain, to fit other people's expectations of who you are. Being comfortable with yourself, I mean, that's a good thing for all of us, clearly. But I think it's indicated a little bit more strongly with self-loving Venus positioned the way she is.
But what I find the most interesting here, as we've talked and kind of sunk into this a little bit more, is that you would expect someone who's a new moon, sun, and rising, a triple Gemini, to be all over the map. I mean, there's that sense of, there's that sense in Gemini of being able to just connect any dots in life in general. And I'm not saying that you can't do that, but there's a tremendous stability and loyalty and a sense of follow-through. Venus retrograde in Cancer is trine, harmonized to stabilizing Saturn. This is a high level of loyalty and commitment and wanting things, attracting things that are real. I'm sorry, Jeff, what did you say?
I said compassion.
Well, it's
Saturn and
compassion,
Pisces,
but it's compassion that's not
in
just
action.
a good idea.
Exactly.
That's right. It's compassion that actually lasts and has sustenance. And then Jupiter and Mars and Mercury in earthy Taurus and the Uranus-Pluto in earthy Virgo, there's a tremendous amount of practicality, stability, and loyalty for an otherwise allegedly flaky Gemini.
Right, and there are no planets in fire signs. And there are a couple of schools of thought. One is, lacking the dynamism, the energy of fire, I think you compensate in lots of ways. You have the sun rising. Nothing's more fiery than the sun, and it was rising in the east. The other school of thought is if you don't have it, you don't need it. I mean, it's just not necessarily here for you to work on in that sense. And rather than having fire be enthusiasm for something that's other than you, with the sun rising, you are the enthusiasm. You are it yourself.
Go
so
girl.
You get it that way. All right? Thank you, Dina Marie.
And now, Sherry or Sherry? Sherry. Sherry.
Hey, hi. A Brighton Busher.
Right.
The Brighton Bush sisters.
Right. Well, how about that?
Yeah. So, what do we say about this chart? Well, you know, it's interesting. I said that planets angular are important. So, right at the very bottom of the chart, which is...
Wrong birthday?
Oh, it is. She wasn't born in 2000. You're not 12? All right.
June 4,
I thought you looked a little worn for your age, but I wasn't going to say anything.
51.
Can we get it wrong a few more times? How's that? Close enough?
Perfect.
Now we need an hour to prepare.
All right. Well,
All right,
look
now
at
we
that.
change.
Looky, looky, looky. It's very different. We've got another sun moon in Gemini, and at the old end of the cycle. What that means, the moon moves faster. It's a lower degree, meaning the moon is coming toward the sun. So that's an old moon just before the new
Just
moon.
like
That's
Dina
two
Marie.
in a row.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Except Sherry has Taurus rising, but Mars in Gemini, like right in the middle of the pile, energizes. You can say something?
Yeah.
So there would be a sense of Taurus rising is more subdued, perhaps, than the Gemini rising, but there's nothing subdued about Mars lined up with the moon and the sun. There's that sense of assertion and a need to express oneself or defend one's territory, maybe even an inherent issue of anger, whether it's expressed or not, or slow burn, but from something early on in life that says, this is what I'm going to do, a sense of determination.
Yeah, I think that's a big difference between these two charts is the ascendant. The ascendant or the rising sign coming up at the east at the moment of birth is one's persona, one's mask, one's primary adaptation to the environment that may or may not reflect the rest of the person. So here with Sherry's chart, we've got, as Rick pointed out, Taurus rising. And what a Taurus rising wants to do is stabilize the environment. But underneath that, there is restless leg syndrome going on here with the moon, the sun, and Mars all in jittery Gemini, but it's underneath that Taurian exterior of relative calm and placidity. Also, Taurus's key ruling planet Venus is at the bottom of the chart. This is a very interesting thing because you think of all that Gemini, particularly with Mars, which is different than Dina Marie's chart, that Mars is like, I gotta keep busy, gotta keep doing stuff, but you also have some healthy relationship with contentment. Venus, the planet of love and pleasure, is at the bottom of the chart, at the roots. There's something at your roots that does understand what pleasure is about, what satisfaction feels like. So it's not as if this is all just a busy, buzzy Gemini chart, although it's got a lot of it.
Well, there is an affection toward innovation and big ideas. Now these are not personal planets. They're not They're not the sun, you know, who you are, or the moon, how you feel, or Mercury, how you think, or Venus, what you like, or Mars, what you do. It's Jupiter, what expands you beyond yourself, and Uranus, the well springs of your egocentricity, the things that make you unique and different. And what's interesting is that Jupiter is very exactly square to Uranus at a degree where now the Uranus-Pluto square is occurring. So this may be very dynamic in what it's presenting to you in changes in your life that may not be about the personal issues of who you like or what you do, but there's something going on that's bubbling up, perhaps some opportunities for change or opening your own perspective into ways that you hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
Yes, no, maybe? No? Yeah.
Could be.
Could be. That's a no.
Not there yet. That's a no. Could be is a no, but still, I would agree with Rick that transiting Uranus is on your sun, and maybe Pluto's opposition to Uranus now is the suppression of that new and different energy. That
You said transiting Uranus is on the sun. Transiting Uranus is on Jupiter.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Transiting Uranus is on Jupiter, which is liberation of from old belief systems and the opening of new beliefs, new philosophies. This is, I would encourage you to explore your intuition and to give your mind opportunities to jump the fence of reality as you know it, to discover or enlarge the field of that which you can understand.
Right, and instead of worrying about what you should do, this in some ways is if it feels like there's something good there for you, just do it. You do it first, ask questions later.
Yeah. And that's true in general, because you have the South Node in Virgo, which will ask a lot of questions before it'll do anything, and you have the North Node in Pisces, which is basically about taking the risk to jump in the water, even if you don't know the temperature, even if you
Don't know that there's water there.
right, or don't even know exactly. It's the leap of faith, and it's an interesting time in your life where at least you can explore it philosophically, intellectually, politically. There's some awakening that seems possible now.
There's a rich fantasy life or a deep level of interest in spiritual issues in general, with the sun harmonizing or trine Neptune. And yet, like Dina Marie's chart, there's also a Venus-Saturn connection. Hers was a trine, yours is a sextile, which again comes back to that whole idea of the loyalty, the sense of longevity, the sense of commitment as being important, and that which is real is what lasts.
Yeah, it's like, yes, I want to see God. How much is it going to cost? Who's paying for this? Well, I think you get some free wisdom coming up with these Uranus transits.
Yeah.
Okay? Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you
Soul
all.
Food. Thank you all. Have a great August.
Thank you, Jeff.
It makes me feel better that our salary here is double the conference.
Your salary was doubled because you're going to do 1 month and I'm going to do another, so it really was. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right, so we'll talk.
I'll talk later in the week. Yeah. Yeah, we can do it any day. We're not on a time schedule now, so
I know.
we just need to keep doing them.
that's the thing.
And I would even suggest that next time we get together, even a lot more time, maybe do 3 weeks or do a couple weeks, take a break, and then do another. I mean, just something. I mean, we used to do a month at a time. We can just keep pounding. It was when we were younger.
Good night. It was delightful.
Well, hey. When?
Share the video,
Um,
and I'll look up the Jackson Brown film.
anything goes.
Wait a minute.
Kate.